All right. So this is going to go back to the idea we had for the first 3 episodes about how do humans know anything? What is the truth? Throughout all of our time trying to figure out reality, we stumbled a few hundred years ago on this instrument called science, where we will try to post all of our data so that other scientists can evaluate what we see, and we can basically use the power of teamwork to try to understand the nature of reality by very freely sharing all of our knowledge and trying to come to these replicable, falsifiable claims about reality. Philosophy, especially analytic philosophy, became so impressed by science that it tried to replicate science. Now, on the other side of the field, you had this thing called postmodernism that sort of ran in the other direction and jumped off a cliff into the abyss. So just like we kind of need to close the loop about political philosophy, we also kind of need to close the loop about epistemology, the study of knowledge and truth. And here we go on that. There's a book called Philosophy of Science, A Very Short Introduction. It's in the library of the course. If you look it up and look for this text, it's there in PDF. I have stolen it for you. If you read chapter 1, it gives you a really good, quick, very readable introduction into what is this thing called science and what does it actually do. Chapter 5 tells us about the revolutions and how they're a little bit more like fashion trends and a little bit less like actual revolutions in thinking. But we'll touch on that for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go into postmodernity, mainly because I think it's so useful for coming up with topics for final presentation for artists. Okay, so here's kind of a background of this. I know it's not perfectly easy to read, but bear with me. At first, you have this idea of epistemology, the question of how do we know what we know? And the first fight that we talked about was rationalism versus empiricism. In rationalism, we know that the senses lie, but the mind has reason, and the mind can use reason to get over the lying nonsense that we get from our senses and see the actual truth of reality. That's rationalism. The giants are like Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz. Empiricism, on the other hand, says that the truth can be found through evidence. Empirical evidence. Empirical evidence doesn't just mean good evidence. Empirical evidence means evidence that I can see with my senses, and then I can show it to you, and you can see it with your senses also. So empiricists say the sense gateways are the ways that we get truth. Now, John Locke, Hume, these were our empiricists. On the scientific side of things, we also get realism. Realism gives us the idea that there is a world out there that exists without humans to experience it. And I'll give you a good example of that right now. It's a question: if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? What is my question really asking? Would sound be there if there wasn't an experiencer to pick up the sound? What if life is a simulation? Well, in a video game, if an NPC is firing a gun, does it make a sound effect? I mean, if you've written a good video game, no, because you'd be wasting energy. You'd be wasting computing power. So when the NPCs are fighting somewhere else, that sound effect shouldn't be happening, because the sound effects are sometimes so good that they're echoing off of the world there. And that's probably going to take a bunch of algorithms to do, right? So if the world is a simulation, shouldn't it be saving power if nobody's over there? If you're watching this and you're not in your car, imagine your car. Does your car exist right now? It's a good question. Realism would say yes, it does. It does make a sound. Your car does exist right now. Even if there's a forest where nobody is seeing it, it doesn't exist right now. Now, idealism is another question, and idealism says reality depends on human experience. The Samkhya Karika, which is Samkhya metaphysics, it's a version of Hinduism, states that all of reality exists for consciousness, for you, for your mind. All of reality is unveiling for your mind. Why? Is it a test? Is it a game? We're getting religious. We're getting metaphysical. You have plenty to write about this week. Now, Descartes' project that we talked about was skepticism, where he was doubting reality. And in doubting reality, he found himself locked up in solipsism. And this is why. Think about, I think, therefore I am. I can prove that I exist, but I can't prove that other things exist, especially not other people's minds. What if you're the only person who exists and I am an NPC? It's very easy to think that I'm an NPC because I'm on a screen. Maybe you've never met me, right? Maybe I'm a two-dimensional object and I don't have any life outside of this. I only exist when you turn on your YouTube and boom, there I am. I'm just an NPC. That would be easy to believe. Because you don't know what's inside of my mind, you just know the sensory outputs as they hit you. I might just be part of the simulation. I might just be an NPC in the video game. So this leaves you in solipsism, where you've proved that you exist by saying, I think, therefore I am, but you have not proved the existence of other human beings, right? So the history of science begins with Aristotle, and he gave us biology, chemistry, physics, astrophysics, told us about the positions of all of the planets and everything that's happening. And then Copernicus and Galileo gave us this time when we realized that the Earth was not in the center. Instead, the sun was in the center. I'm reading about Descartes' life right now, and he was afraid to publish things because of what was happening to Copernicus and Galileo when they were challenging the order of reality. Aristotle was one of the most influential philosophers of all time because he commented on everything, but he did so incorrectly. And when we started to get a scientific revolution in the end, where the physicists show up, Boyle gives us equations, Newton gives us the standard model, and then Einstein kind of broke the standard model. All of that flipped over the Aristotelian world and gave us a brand new world. So one more thing to remember about science is there's actual science and then there is pseudoscience. The philosopher Karl Popper said that science must be falsifiable. And what that basically means is your method sounds really good, but show me how to prove you wrong. A scientist like Einstein would say, sure, this is how you would know that I'm wrong. I'm going to give you this mathematical output, and if you don't get a number like this, clearly I'm wrong. That's why Popper thought that Einstein was a hero scientifically. And he thought Freud and Marx, both top 10 thinkers of all time in terms of the old school academicinfluence.com, both Freud and Marx has shaped the way so many human beings see the world. It's not even funny. They are top 10 thinkers in terms of influence. But Popper thought they were both pseudoscientists. Freud was giving us a model that could be used to interpret the mind, and just whatever he decided it was going to be was what it was. Marx was doing the same thing with history. We talked about this already. And he said that these things were pseudoscience. Freud, with his psychoanalysis, could bend it in any way. It was not actual science because it wasn't falsifiable. Marx, with his historical materialism, was predicting the future and he could bend it to any eventuality. This is not science because science makes a true prediction. It's going to rain tomorrow. When it doesn't rain, it says, well, I was wrong. So I'm updating my beliefs and I'm going to continue trying to refine my methods. But I was wrong. But Marx and Freud, they don't ever say that they were wrong. Now, who else doesn't say that they're wrong? Religions. Religions don't say that they're wrong. Religions may update, and religions may be interpreted in different ways, but they don't say that they're wrong. But they are not sciences, and therefore they are not pseudosciences. Something like astrology is more like a pseudoscience because it's trying to say, based on the placement of these stars, this is what's going to happen. It's faking a scientific method by not actually using one. Another way of testing laws is Socrates' three sieves test. If somebody comes up to you with a piece of information, you have to weigh it 3 times. The first thing you ask is if it's true. The second thing you ask is if it's good. And the third thing that you ask is it necessary? And in one of the dialogues, a man approaches Socrates to try to tell him a rumor about his friend. And he goes, before you tell me the rumor, let me know, is it true? And the guy says, I don't know if it's true or not. Socrates is like, man, you don't even know if it's true and you're going to tell me this? All right, well, tell me this. Is it good? Is this a good thing that you're going to tell me? No, it's terrible. Oh, so it's not even true. Then you're going to tell me something that's really bad. Okay, let me ask you one thing. Do I need to know this? Is there any help that I can provide for my friend? Or is there something that I can say to you that's going to maybe help in some way? Oh, no. It's just purely a piece of gossip. And just, all right. So you're going to tell me something about my friend. You don't know if it's true. You know that it's not good. And me knowing this isn't going to matter because there's nothing I can do about it. How about I just keep walking and I don't listen to you? Right? That was Socrates' 3 sieves test. And this is another way of kind of like scientifically deciding to weigh what we know or we don't know. The 4th chapter of this book, which I think is really the most amazing, gives us sort of the last fight between believers of science. These are believers of science who don't agree about realism. They do agree that science is probably the best way that we have of getting knowledge about the world, but they don't know if they agree about the world. All right, let's get into it. Epic rap battles of history, right? We had rationalism versus empiricism, realism versus idealism, moral relativism versus moral realism. We talked about that already. Analytic versus continental. We talked about all of these already. And then we get into realism versus idealism. And this is the question of whether or not reality needs human beings there to exist. The idealists think you do need humans there, or consciousness at least, to experience reality, and it wouldn't exist without us. It's something like the Maya, the Leela. Now, according to an idealist, the tree who falls in the woods would not make a sound if there's no consciousness around. According to a realist, that tree falling would make a boom because the boom is made of sound waves. Sound waves are real things that we are picking up in the real world. Now, realism is saying the world is real, and idealism is saying the world is maybe real, but how can you say you really know? And that's maybe silly to some people, but if you think about it philosophically, it's not. Descartes proved the existence of the self, but not the existence of the world. Okay, so realism versus idealism is basically materialism versus Cartesian skepticism, Plato's cave, the Maya, the simulation hypothesis, phenomenology. These are all different ways of getting into something like idealism. But that's not what we're talking about here. This is my favorite idealist. His name is Donald Hoffman. Look him up. His work is really amazing. You can do a final presentation about him if you like. Okay, here's what it really is. Realism thinks that science gives us information about the real world. Anti-realism, sometimes called instrumentalism, says that scientific knowledge seems to work for now. What's the difference? Well, realism says we are finding out real information about the world. Germs are real. They're real things that we have discovered. The way that they behave gets us sick or not sick. Anti-realism would say the germ theory of how we get sick is our best theory. We should follow it, and I believe the science that is based on the germ theory. However, I am waiting to be surprised by the knowledge that the germ theory is actually not true. And there's something within the germs that's actually making things happen. And really it's something else, right? And an anti-realist would say, look at all the times that we've been wrong. We thought that the Earth was at the center of the solar system and the sun went around us. And now we've found out that that's not true. That is science being overturned. We thought that Newtonian physics happens everywhere, but it turns out with really big objects and really tiny objects, the Newtonian model breaks down, and instead we need to use general relativity or, Einstein's model to pick up where Newton's left off. That's a huge revolution in physics. We used to think that all these animals were different kinds of animals that must have been created separately, but actually we all evolved from common ancestors and we were separated, and then after a little while we can't make babies together, and so that's how you get these different species. And even the idea of a species is not as clear as we thought it was. Science is really crazy, it's changing all the time. We might never find out a complete picture of knowledge. That is anti-realism. It actually seems really, I'm an anti-realist now, right? Realism, I find arrogant because realism says maybe we don't know everything yet. We don't have a complete picture of gravity, dark matter, dark energy. There's some things we don't know yet, but we're going to get it all, right? Now, realism doesn't even need to go that far. Realism just needs to say that there's a thing there. There's a world there. It's not, and we can know everything about it. It's just that there's a world there. Anti-realism is like, one, we're probably not going to get it all. Two, if we're probably not going to get it all, maybe it's never going to be something that we can have because maybe it doesn't exist the way that we think things exist. Right? Maybe it's some kind of illusion. Maybe it's some kind of dream. Maybe we're in a computer simulation, but we have computers, and the way that we understand computers has not been messed up by quantum computing yet. Maybe things are so crazy that they're multidimensional and we can't figure them out. This is anti-realism. I'm obviously some kind of anti-realist. You want to argue with me, take the realist perspective. This is also sometimes called materialism, and Marx picks that up with historical materialism. Now, realists hold that science aims to provide a true description of the world and that it often succeeds. Anti-realists hold that the aim of science is to find theories that are empirically adequate, which correctly predict the results of experiment and observation. If a theory achieves perfect empirical adequacy, the further question of whether it truly describes the world is redundant. And that means if the science works, fine. I don't need to say anything more other than the science works. If you tell me that there's little ghosts that get on my hands and those little ghosts get me sick and that makes me wash my hands, you've created a theory that changes my behavior in a way that's going to make me do a thing that's going to keep me healthy. If you can do that, you're doing science, according to an anti-realist. What do you think? Jump in on this. Now, the project of modernity states that we are moving closer and closer and closer to the truth. And we get closer and closer and closer as time goes on. Our science is advancing. Our morality is getting better. But there are people who disagree with this idea. And those people would be called postmodernists. So postmodernity is something that's been going on since before any of us were born. And is interesting for artists to do philosophy presentations about. Postmodernism basically criticizes the idea that we're on our way to something else. One does not simply define postmodernism, and that's quite true. It's defined in contradistinction to modernism. We'll have to talk about what that is. Now, modernity is this idea that rationality is leading to emancipation. We maybe are going to get our society to get better and better and better and eventually become utopian. It believes in experts. We also have this elitist notion that some people are smarter because they're further down the path towards enlightenment. And this isn't enlightenment like Nibbana, but enlightenment like becoming closer to a truth that can be used to manipulate the variables of reality such that we can have a better life. Postmodernity is basically questioning this idea. Postmodernism or postmodern gives us the idea that post is coming after, it's beyond it, or that modernism is something that was kind of a mistake that we're walking away from. How do you see yourself? Now remember relativism? Relativism starts to rear its ugly head again. Postmodernism has this idea that all truth is relative, except for this statement. And this is something that's a common argument that I get into on Twitter, where the postmodern people will lay things out, and it's like, okay, but if all of these things are relative, so is the idea that everything is relative. And if the idea that everything is relative, maybe there's actually truth. It's a double negative, logically speaking. But logic is part of modernity that postmodernity is going to fight against. Now, one of the things that modernism believes in is the idea of the beautiful. And if you're in an aesthetics class or an art appreciation class, we talk quite a bit about the beautiful. If this is going by too fast, don't worry. We have a whole class about this coming up after the summer. The beautiful is this idea that there is one version of the beautiful. And this is a great thing to do presentations about. Look at the difference between, let's say, Western famous people who are considered beautiful, and they're famous for being beautiful. Just think about them. Google beautiful person in English. Now think about K-pop. Who's beautiful in K-pop? There's the BTS boys who all look exactly the same. And then there's a bunch of K-pop girls who all look exactly the same. They all have to have the exact same bodies and they have to be exactly the same height too, right? Why do they have to be the same height too? I mean, even if you're being shallow, why does their height matter? I don't know, whatever. Even if you're being shallow, right? Okay, I would argue that in the West, there's more variance between people who are famous for being beautiful than there is in K-pop. Why would that be? Some of the answers I usually get is there's more racial diversity in what's called the West, right? You got people who have all different colors of skin. You have people who came from different places in the world. They all mix together, have a bunch of babies together, and then you have all these people that look, different ways. But K-pop is now being sold to everybody. But they only have different color hair. What do you think? Is there one beautiful man and one beautiful woman and that's all there is? Do you believe in that? What about music? Is there a sense of the beautiful pulling on music? And can you feel it when a piece of music that you're making becomes too long? Have you ever decided to play something for 16 bars and then kind of realize, we're here too long and I get bored? How about we just make it be 8 bars and we have a little transition on the way in and we just do it for 8 bars and then we pop back into the chorus? Because 16 bars is too long. And everybody shakes their head and they say, yeah, it's too long. Is the beautiful being expressed more by the thing that's 8 bars instead of 16 bars? Are you conforming to a true beauty by shortening your song? Or maybe you have these 2 choruses and they're both short choruses and you have one chorus at the end that's long, but then you realize that the second chorus also needs to be long. And then when you do that, you're like, and everybody in the room goes, yes, that's the way it should be. Okay, great. Now let's get back to work, right? When you all get the right answer and you all agree, what are you finding? It seems like you're finding a truth in the world that's being revealed by your decision. Or are you just conforming to what most people like? Is that all socially determined, right? When somebody on TV is beautiful, are we being brainwashed to believe that they're beautiful, or are they actually beautiful? And where does that actuality come from? Is it like the form of the beautiful, as our friend Plato would believe? Is it written into us in evolution? Do each of us have different opinions about who is beautiful? If so, does that fight against the idea that there's one that's universal? Or are some people just more correct than other people? What do you think, right? And I mean, if I ask you, do you think BTS boys are pretty? Some people will go, oh my God, yes, BTS boys are so pretty. And some other people are like, no, BTS boys are not that pretty. Who's right? Right? I mean, does everybody have their own idea of this? It's more of a postmodern idea. I argue that when it comes to human beings, there is more uniformity between the beautiful people on Asian TV than there is in Western TV. Is it because there's more different races represented in the West? I don't know. Is it because the West is more postmodern? I don't know. What do you think? I find media extremely interesting because it is the way that we are being brainwashed. And that's a great thing to study in philosophy. Okay. So pre-modern means let's not think about anything because here it is, right? I'm hungry and I need to eat. Big cats with big fangs are scary, so let's get into the cave and get a pointy stick, and if it comes in here, we'll poke it in the nose, right? Once we start building societies, humanity is on its way somewhere. And where is it on its way to? It's on its way to something better, right? Postmodern is like, oh, this is all shit. We're not on our way anywhere. And the post version in music, a lot of people say that Beethoven was the top of all of it. Beethoven was the end of art. And anything beyond Beethoven is just a bunch of nonsense and innovation that has degenerated into bananas taped to the wall. You believe in that? There you have postmodernity, okay? It is uncertainty. It is the lack of absolutes, such as the beautiful or the good. And it states that progress that we sometimes think is just on our way, more humans getting more rights, more science getting more correct. No, progress is unlikely. We're just wandering around. When the scientific paradigms changed, they changed like fashion trends. It's time to have a higher high heel. Now it's time to have a fatter high heel. Why? No reason. The modern genius says, I'm a genius. And the postmodern genius says the category of a genius is a theoretically untenable cultural construct. I'm a genius. Critiques of modernism are basically postmodern, and they say all this is just a bunch of brand identity nonsense. Commodity fetishism, use value versus exchange value, right? Diamonds are stupid. Now, I'll give you a couple of these now. These are Marxist terms. The use value is how useful something is. The exchange value is how much money that you can get it for. My coffee cup right here can hook onto something. It can keep my coffee warm. I bought it for 300 baht. If I buy a coffee cup for 300,000 baht, I am stupid because the use value of it is something like 300 baht. If it's stainless steel and it's really not going to get me sick and everything, and I spend 1,000 baht, all right, that's making some more sense because there's more use value in there. It's making me more healthy. It keeps my coffee more hot. It's more easy to clean. But once you get to 300,000 baht, you're just stupid. And the best example of this is expensive purses. If I have a normal bag, it carries stuff. That's its use value. And its exchange value is something around its use value. I go to the grocery store, I can get a bag for 5 baht. Your Prada bag or your Louis Vuitton bag or whatever, what is its exchange value? 1,000,000 baht. Why is the bag 1,000,000 baht? Fight me if you like. This is not a pipe. That's what this says, right? Because this is a representation of a pipe. Okay. John Cage put silence on stage as music. We have bananas taped to the wall because we had toilets in art galleries. The art is broken, right? When Stravinsky gave us The Rite of Spring, there was a riot because the way that the music was and the way that the dance was, they're like, this is not the art. I will have a riot and I will throw my steed. And then people started to pay rioters to try to riot because you're only a genius if you're destroying something. This is the postmodern landscape as it exists. I'm going to end it here because we're going to have a whole nother class about this, and I have another concept that I want to talk to you about that's a little bit more inspiring. But what do you think of this postmodern existence? Do you find yourself to be a postmodern artist? Is modernity broken off of its path and never going to continue? Are we done with the project of music and instead we're just mixing these unoriginal things together into more and more absurd things? Are we able to find meaning in these absurd things we're creating? What do you think? You can write about it this week, yes, but what you really need to be doing is getting that final presentation in order. All right, I have one more idea for you, and then we'll close it out. Yeah, I'm going to try to keep the ideas quick. We're going to talk about Nietzsche. Look at this man's mustache. Here we go. So just to review the idea of property that we got to when we talked about libertarianism and kind of explored the idea of how can we have a musical situation that's better than what we have now. The American entertainment law, where you own intellectual property based on your ability to take the natural resources of music like keys, styles, notes and rhythms, these things that can't really be copyrighted. I can't copyright a harmonic minor, and we don't want to live in a world where people can copyright a harmonic minor. It would just be too silly. Everything would be owned and you couldn't really make any ideas. But the world that we live in, when you mix your creativity with music, it becomes your property. You own music. The other thing that we talked about was the ability for a culture to own music. Thai traditional music, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you don't normally know who wrote the song. For a while, before the recording industry became big. But it was something that kind of like belonged to the culture. And we see this happen in the idea of cultural appropriation. Cultural meaning, right, sangkom, and appropriation basically means stealing. So it means you're stealing from another culture if you do cultural appropriation. And this is an idea that we've talked about a few times, but an idea that people don't usually pay attention to that's kind of stuck inside of that idea is that a culture can own property, right? So Vikings own horn helmets, or the Mongols own the short bow or something. And if you are stealing this idea, you steal it from a culture. And this kind of makes sense, actually. If I put the god Vishnu in my art, I'm kind of stealing from the Hindus. They're a culture. They worship the god Vishnu. Not all of them, but some of them do. And I'm stealing him from this culture, right? If you think that's interesting, do a final presentation about it. I'm going to go into the idea of property, like physical property, and then we can move on from there. So libertarianism is the idea that my freedom to swing my arm ends at your nose. That's the way that they usually put it, right? Or your freedom to swing your arm ends at my nose. You can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt me. You can do whatever floats your boat as long as it doesn't sink my ship. So I am free to do whatever I want until my freedom intersects with your freedom. And this usually involves limited rights, and those are life, liberty, and property. Don't take my stuff. Don't enslave me. Don't kill me. Don't do violence to me, right? So this is a very limited law that's involved in the social contract. Libertarians don't want a government to interfere in the lives of human beings. Libertarians think that it's better if we just figure out how to handle all the things that we have to handle by using our freedom and using our relationships and That's it. We don't need a ton of rules. And the social contract theorists will say that we consent to the social contract. And we do that because we're driving on the roads, we're enjoying world peace. And if you remember, I made the argument that billionaires and big corporations should pay more tax because they benefit more from world peace. You couldn't have Amazon without world peace. You couldn't have, I forget the Chinese version of it, Jack Ma. You couldn't have Jack Ma's version of it without world peace. A lot of these big global corporations, they benefit from globalization. This part of it is made in China, and this part of it is designed in Japan or whatever, right? You have the whole world working together on these things. And if you don't have that whole world working together, none of these global corporations can exist. We're all sharing ideas. We're all sharing expertise. We're shipping things all over the world in these gigantic shipping boats, and nobody gets blasted by pirates, or it happens so infrequently that people are willing to risk shipping stuff across oceans. And so we enjoy this globalization thing. Who benefits the most? Billionaires and big corporations. That's why they should pay the most in taxes, because they are paying into a government, and that government makes world peace happen. This is not a libertarian idea, because the libertarians want a very tiny government. But I would argue that the libertarians would not be enjoying world peace if it wasn't for these very big governments full of all of this institutional bloat. Doge happened in the United States. Elon Musk went in and got rid of all of these jobs. Now, the thing is funny, these are like jobs with the UN. You know, there's an international war machine. Doge and Elon Musk kind of started cutting away at the international peace machine. And there's a lot of waste in there. There really is. There's a bunch of people who have silly jobs. They don't do very much. Those people exist. But my argument, and you can fight this if you want, is having a lot of these different people in these countries, being friends with each other, having no stress, getting paid a bunch of taxpayer money, they create a situation where a bunch of international people are friendly with one another. They hang out with all of the wealthy decision makers. Their kids go to the same schools and everything. And it makes everybody friendly towards all the rest of the world and makes this globalization thing happening. Is globalization good? That's another good final presentation idea for you, because this is the last time that we'll have this lecture, quiz, right? We may not even have a quiz. You may have a very easy quiz about your opinions, and then we move on so that you can focus on your final presentation. You do have to write this week. I would like you to write, but think mostly about what your final presentation is going to be. If you do your final presentation about the same thing that you write about this week, I'm probably never going to know. I'm not going to remember, oh, wait a minute, I remember that student had the same final presentation. So just commit your whole mind right now to thinking about, what do you think is interesting? And then when you're writing your weekly writing, that could very quickly be expanded into your final presentation. It's going to be quite easy, man. Don't worry about it. Don't use ChatGPT. Don't use ChatGPT. Okay. So how do we have property? Well, the property isn't just my dad had property, therefore I get property. And why did that happen? It's because I have good karma from a former life. That's why I get to be wealthy. And that's why P-Win Motorsai has to work. Do you believe that? That's another good one. What we do instead is we mix our labor with the land, and that allows us to own property. The intellectual property version of that, of course, is I mix my creativity with all of these trends and ideas that are flowing through the world, and then that makes me own property. A good example of this is Splice. They have all of these samples, and if you don't change them, you're probably going to put your beat up on YouTube and find out that it's getting a copyright flag because somebody else already posted the Splice beat that you have posted, right? And if you're doing that, what you really need to do is pitch shift it or make it backwards or throw it into the beat repeat machine in Ableton and chop it up or something, because then you're mixing the natural resource of Splice with your creativity, and then the algorithm is not going to catch it. One more thing for you. What do you think is the most important driver about ownership of art? Is it ethics? Is it the law? Or is it technology? And I'll tell you what I think. I think it's technology, because ethics never really matters. 25 years ago, it became free and easy to download music onto your machine for free. We all did it, even though we all knew it was wrong, because the technology made it possible. We were all pirates. Everyone was a pirate. Either that or they didn't know how to do it. And then they would ask their friends to burn them CDs of their pirated music. We were all pirates, everyone. The law. They tried to go after people with the law. Nobody cared, because the technology made it possible. Now, when we think about owning music today, I think that's immediately where the conversation goes, because I just said, is it legal for me to post something that I made from Splice? If I take Splice beats and I don't change them, and then I like rap over them, and then I put them on YouTube, I should own that. But somebody else put that same beat up before I did. And so I'm getting copyright flag. And the technology doesn't involve me being like, hey, this is a Splice beat. I'm supposed to be able to use it, but I can't use it to put it on YouTube. What the heck? It should be ethical for me to do that, and it should be legal for me to do that. But the technology doesn't allow me to do that because the algorithm will catch it. So what matters the most? Is it the ethics? Is it the law? Or is it the technology? Clearly, I think it's the technology. If you think that it's something else, or if you know that there are different ways to get around this Splice problem with YouTube, go ahead and share that. That'd be a nice final presentation. Intellectual property, IP. We also talked about two different ways of seeing this, and it kind of maps onto politics, which maps onto ethics, right? Communism is the idea that us is important. This community, all of us working together, making something happen. That's the most important thing. Capitalism doesn't necessarily say that community is the worst thing in the world and we should destroy it. It says, hey man, human beings are rather selfish. We're transactional. People want what they want, and they're willing to trade certain things for what they want. I don't always have what you want at the time that you have what I want. So simple trading doesn't always work. Sometimes we need some medium of exchange in between there. And so we have this magic stuff called money. If I want some studio time, I go in and I give somebody some of that money and they help me with the recording. I pay them and I'm like, thank you very much. I feel good giving you this money for your work. I appreciate you. Have a nice day. And then that person goes and they eat dinner. And they eat a bunch of food and they pay some of that money for some of their food. They use some of it to take care of their car or whatever. We can all go around satisfying these many desires and needs that we have with this stuff called money. And while communism might be a better ideal because it's not based on just simple gratification of desire, capitalism is closer to reality. Do you think that's true? Do you think it's untrue? Again, I'm just going to try to give you different ways that you can kind of fight against me, fight with me, show me that maybe you think that I'm wrong. That's a great thing to do in the final presentation. So communism versus capitalism was the stage that was set for the Cold War. And if we're carrying the story of politics into the present day, it's the most recent fight that we had in the political landscape. If you go to the United States, it's all Republicans and Democrats, but that's just a bunch of silliness. The communists versus the capitalists thing was quite a serious event. Enough of that. Let's finally get into Nietzsche. This is kind of the end of ethics. We're going to think about the problems of nihilism. But the reason I bring up Marx before I bring up Nietzsche is because they had a really similar respect for this cat, Hegel. So there's Nietzsche. He cut morality into two as well. There wasn't just a bourgeoisie and a proletariat, right? There was master and slave morality. And this comes from Hegel. Marx also did the same thing, but like I said before, he had the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and he thought the proletariat was going to rise up, break off their chains, and take over the bourgeoisies. The red anarchists believe this. I think I probably told you there are green anarchists who think that society itself is oppressive and crazy and we should just stop doing it. Cities are insane. Look at all of the PM 2.5 everywhere. This is nuts. It's unsustainable. It's not natural. We should get rid of these cities and go back to living close to nature. Red anarchists thought that the workers are in the factory making all of these things happen, and we don't need these owners. They're unnecessary. I've said this before with the idea of a school. You have teachers teaching, you have staff members cleaning and taking care of the building, you're paying for the water, you're paying for the building, but you also have to pay for some rich family to buy their sons supercars. We don't need that rich family. We could just have a school and then everybody could learn at a really high level. Everybody would be smart. Wouldn't that be a beautiful world? No, we have to support these parasites, right? That is Marxism. I'm not telling you my opinion. I'm telling you Marxism. And Marxism and red anarchy get together really good because red anarchy is trying to say, let's all do the work together. We don't need these owners because they don't provide any value for society. They're just non-contributing elements that take everything. Remember Rick and Morty, the makeys and the takeys? They're the takeys, and then the makeys are the ones that make everything happen. So the red anarchists don't want to create the authoritarian government that forces everybody to stop exchanging things for free and instead follow the rules that are going to create equality. Instead, you just have the workers working and we just get rid of the owners. Do you think that would be possible? That's a red anarchist. Okay. So the master-slave dichotomy is something that we have from a book called Phenomenology of Perception. It's very, 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 very hard to read, but everybody in philosophy gets assigned at least the master-slave dialectic because it's such an important idea. Hegel kind of gave birth to both Marx and Nietzsche. So let's get into Nietzsche. One of the things that he gave us very powerfully is an ethics that I'm going to push us into kind of an existentialism. Nietzsche is often read as one of the existentialists. So the way that he took this master-slave dialectic is actually quite interesting. He talks about back in the day, there was the master morality. And in the master morality, you have the strong. The strong go out there and they take what they want, they do what they want to do, and they give good to the people who give them good, and they repay any kind of bad thing with bad. You do something good for me. I remember that. I appreciate it. And I say, hey, I remember that you did something good for me. Now I'm going to do something good for you. If you mess with me, or if you mess with somebody that I care about, I am going to retaliate. I'm going to fight you. This is what he called master morality. It is the rule of the strong. And a lot of people who talk about anarchy say, all right, well, whoever the strongest, and then they will add most ruthless person is going to rule. They're going to win in anarchy. Now, meanwhile, you have weak people. And the weak people are bad. And the reason is, if I'm a weak person and you do good to me, I can say thank you, but I can't give you anything good back because I'm weak. I don't have power to make stuff happen in the world. Furthermore, if you do something bad to me, I can't do anything bad back to you because, again, I don't have power. So in the old school, the master morality was a situation where the good are strong because they can punish people who mess with them and they can reward people who are good to them. And so that's the person that you want to deal with. And when I say it like this, that actually makes a lot of sense. If we're living in an older version of reality where ethics are kind of hard to create. And I think ethics are moving forward in this kind of pursuit towards a better good. We just got to a point where we have marriage equality in Thailand. And if we go back 30 years, you can't have that, you know? I don't know, 80 years ago, men and women couldn't have the same jobs. Now men and women could have the same jobs. We have a situation where kind of more rights are being given to more people. I like more rights being given to more people. I think we're going in a good direction. And I think I told you before that I think that when your grandchildren, if you have any children, and if your children have any children, look at you when you're like 70 years old and you say, you kids are crazy, you shouldn't do that. They'll be like, shut up, Grandma. You used to eat meat. You ate meat. That's horrible, right? Because it is horrible. These animals suffer very much for us, but we're hungry and we need to eat some food. And so we capture and torture these animals. We raise them in captivity, and they live these horrible lives in darkness until they get killed by CP and sold by CP and then eaten by us, right? It's a very dark, awful thing, and we're all a part of it because the future hasn't happened yet. But as the future goes on, hopefully we're going to get more moral to the point where we don't have to torture animals in order to eat anymore. You think that's true? What do you think? I was a vegan for 4 years, but I've already lost all of my vegan karma. Let's keep going with Nietzsche. Okay. The master morality said the good involves taking what you want and, like repaying good with good, repaying bad with bad. That's a morality, right? If I'm looking for a friend, a weak person in this world can't be a good friend because they can't repay good with good and they can't repay bad with bad. They're just going to do whatever happens. And if a strong person comes to push on them, they're just going to cave under pressure. So they can't really be loyal to me, So that it's not that those were the people he decided were good. It's like those were the people who actually were good. They're the ones who could hold up morally. Slave morality is a different sort of a situation. I bring up the anonymous because these are people who will wait for somebody to become powerful, and then that powerful person will be doing things that are selfish, and anonymous will come up and they will attack that person from the shadows, usually with cyber attack. Now, I got to be honest, I think they're cool, but I'm trying to give you a version of slave morality that is, new and interesting. All right, let's go to the chart. So in the past, master morality was a situation where the strong were good and the weak were bad. Slave morality flips things. And when Nietzsche talks about this, he sees it through the Christian eyes. And he says in modern times, and he was writing 150 years ago, 180 years ago, something like that. He said, in these modern times, it is the weak who are considered good, and the strong are considered not just bad, but evil. And what he means by that, you can see in Christianity. The meek shall inherit the earth. There's this idea that the weak people are good and that the strong people are bad. Jesus also says it would be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, the little part where you thread the needle. It'd be easier for a camel to pass through that tiny little space than for a rich man to get into heaven. And what he's basically saying is, if you're very powerful and you're not using your power for the utmost good, it's going to be really hard for you to be seen as good in Christian morality. The weak, however, just by being weak, they seem to be doing good. This is part of Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity. If this bothers you, do a presentation about it. Now, new morality, he thought, would be up to you. It would be what's coming next, and it would be determined by what he calls free spirits. Free spirits are going to be able to look at this nihilistic world where there's nothing to believe in And free spirits would be able to create their own morality out of nothing by deciding, I know what's good. You know how? Boom. This is me creating my good, right? And I talked before about how creativity is like an audacity, because you create your lead in your opera and you're like, my lead's name is James. There he is. And James looks like this and he sounds like this and he really wants this. Well, how do you know what James wants? Shut up. Because I said so. I am a creator, right? Well, what about a creator of morals? You're somebody who looks at the world and you don't say, oh, you have an opinion and I have an opinion. You say, this is what's right. Why? Don't ask me to argue. That's what's right, because I say it's right and I have this and I believe in it, right? You're creating faith out of nothing. That is what a free spirit should be able to do. Do you think that's cool? Do you think it's not cool? Do a presentation about it. Slave morality is the times that he was living in, and he saw them only growing, and they do exist today, especially in the West. Who do we talk the most trash about? Have you ever heard of the President of the United States? Have you ever heard somebody talk trash about him? I mean, it's kind of easy to talk trash about him because he's a pretty ridiculous fellow. But throughout most of history, we're not like trashing our leaders. It's like a rare thing that the Westerners do. Do you think the Western culture is going to survive if one of our traditions involves trashing our leaders? Don't just think about people who are actual leaders. What about the people who are the richest people in the world? Have you ever heard any of their names? Elon Musk, is he popular right now? Do people love Elon? Are people like, yeah, Elon, he's so great. A little while ago, yes. But he's been in the number one position for a little while. He got involved with Donald Trump, did Doge, and started chopping up the American peace machine. Not so loved anymore. And Elon's getting pretty universally trashed. My sister has a Tesla, and she ripped the T, her husband, my brother-in-law, ripped the T off of the car because they didn't want the brand of Elon on their car. They're like, we support the engineers, the workers, but not Elon, right? We do want to trash the strong, and the word that we like to use for them is evil. Now, do you think this is right? Right or wrong, it does quite properly describe the world that we live in. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I do think that we're becoming more ethical over time. So is this a good evolution? Or should we rise to this new morality? Well, Nietzsche thought not everybody is going to be a free spirit. The most of people are the herd, and they just want to be told what to do. They want to follow directions. But free spirits, he thought, are going to be rare. And then the even more rare thing than the free spirits would be the Ubermensch, right? And you could talk about whatever that is, the Superman, the Overman, the superior human being. Will there be one? Will there be many? There's a lot of argument about that, and I'm not going to get into it. His concept of free spirits, however, is really cool. And if you're going to shoot for something in this moral landscape, being a free spirit sounds pretty cool. Or you just believe in something that's already made. People who have a religion, people who have a belief tend to be quite happier. But if you don't have one, you kind of have to create one for yourself. What do you believe in? Well, you can scroll on the internet and find people forcing you to believe. If you have an emptiness there, it will be filled by screens, or it can be filled by you if you have the power to will that yourself. Nietzsche also said that haters are going to hate, right? And slave morality is a situation where being a hater is great. I always talk about how I hate Adam Levine. He's the most famous Western artist in Thailand. Every restaurant you go in, you have to listen to Adam Levine sing very accurately through his nose. I hate it. Hate the sound of his voice. Hate his stupid face. I hate his songwriting choices. The first album was good. Everything else sounds like a commercial for itself. And then my friend over here, Taylor Swift, right? She said very wisely, haters are going to hate, right? That was one of the things that Nietzsche was talking about. He was talking about how everybody is such a hater now. And whenever somebody rises and becomes successful, there should be haters coming out of the woodwork to give them problems. And listen to me talk about Taylor Swift, the greatest musician of the 21st century. I'm being a hater all the time. And I'm bothered by this so much that I even wrote a song about the hater within, right? Interesting. Do a presentation about it. Nietzsche finished this moral theory off by writing a second book called Beyond Good and Evil, and he thought that the new morality would involve going beyond good and evil, and that the concepts of good and evil are old. We don't really have enough knowledge to accurately describe what's true good and what's true evil. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? I don't know if I agree with that, because there's a lot of things that are evil that I just think, that's an evil person. And it's not just that I can hang this word evil on them. It's also that I don't want to let this person near people who I care about, because I don't think that's going to go well for the people who I care about. And I think that this is somebody who might hurt the people I care about, because this is an evil person. Okay. Another idea that he had that's really cool for artists is this idea of the Apollonian and the Dionysian. And this comes from his first book that was all about how Wagner's music was going to save the world, right? So the Apollonian comes from the sun god, Apollo. This is all about order, ideas, rationality, logic, and the mind. It's the pure light of reason. If we talk about rationality, that's living in the firmly Apollonian space. The Dionysian Dionysius was the god of wine, and the book that I read that dealt most with Dionysius was called the Bacchae, and it's where these women called the Maenads, they were the followers of Dionysius, who was a new god trying to show Greece, hey, here I am, here I come, I'm a new god, check me out. And his followers, if somebody would like doubt Dionysius, the followers would just show up in this giant mob and rip these people apart. It was crazy. And it wasn't a Greek tragedy. It wasn't a Greek comedy. It was something in between. Really amazing. So I would say check this out. It's really cool. But this is a new god showing up on the scene. And Nietzsche was a philosopher. Yes, we read him as a philosopher, but that was not his job. He was a philologist. And a philologist was somebody who basically just studies the ancient Greeks. That was his whole thing. So him writing about these ancient gods, that was his thing. He was also a musician, and he also hung out with Wagner a ton, because he wrote this whole book about how Wagner was the greatest, and Wagner was like a super narcissist. So he was like, oh, you think I'm the greatest? Yeah, come hang out with me, right? So in the beginning, Wagner loved young Nietzsche. He trashed his music. Liszt thought his music was awesome. Wagner said that his music was so stupid. He'd get Nietzsche to play for his friends, and then he'd criticize Nietzsche. Wagner had a wife that was much younger, around the age of Nietzsche. Nietzsche seems to have been in love with Wagner's wife. Several books later, Nietzsche ends up writing this book, Nietzsche contra Wagner, like Nietzsche against Wagner. He saw Wagner for what he truly was. He wasn't into Wagner, and then Wagner wasn't really into Nietzsche. So those two stopped being homies. And Wagner, if you've studied him at all in the history of music, the word Wagnerian does mean to make your music like Wagner, but there were also people who would renounce their kingdoms to go be a Luxit, a follower of Wagner. He was like a cult. He was like a walking god. Everybody thought that he was the most important guy in the world, and he definitely thought he was the most important guy in the world. Again, my question, does narcissism help creatives grow to this grand sense? And in the case of Wagner, it would be yes, even more so when they are actually talented. Okay, so how does Nietzsche's philosophy look now? Let me go back to this. So the Apollonian and the Dionysian, what does this mean for musicians? The Dionysian first is the idea of intoxication, ritual madness, fertility, drunkenness, intoxication. You know what I mean? He's a wine god. And if you're an artist, tapping into the Dionysian part of your art is extremely important. Because let me ask you this, where do your ideas come from? If you're a songwriter, or if you're a creator, if you're a composer or something, if you're creating characters for an opera, if you're creating your method for playing a character, if you're creating a connection to the emotion of the piece that you're trying to get into. I remember it all. I don't need to look at the music anymore. I remember it. I'm playing all the notes accurately. There's still something missing. What is it? You're not connecting to the emotion of the piece. How do you get there? Get your heart broken. Oh, that's a nice doorway into a place where you can really let that music flow through you because your heart has been broken by some horrible thing. What else do musicians do? How many musicians die of drug overdoses? How many great musicians are taken from us because they go too far into the world of drugs? Many. How many of them dance on that borderline and don't get taken away by the demon? Many. How many of our friends always drink when they play music? Why do people drink when they play music? What is it that they're trying to get? They're trying to get into some kind of an altered state of consciousness so that they can get the feeling of the spirits, to get that little bit of a distortion of reality. Well, how else do you do that? What if you don't want to drink alcohol all the time? What if you play music every single night and you don't want to drink every single night? What if you want to be a professional and you want to be sustained? What if you need to wake up in the morning and go to class because you're still in music school? What if you have another job, you know? How do you handle this without just throwing down alcohol all the time? Well, some of it is built into music. Do we play music in super bright lights? Or do we have dark lights? And do we have stage lights that make everything look weird? Right? Stage lights don't make everything look normal. It's not easy to see in stage lights. Stage lights are not made for your phone to take a good picture. That's why all the live shots don't look good. Stage lights are supposed to distort reality. They're not to show you exactly what a person looks like. Why would you have these smoke machines on stage? Why would you do that? It makes it harder to see the people. Don't you want to see accurately what they're doing? No, you don't want to see accurately what they're doing. You want to see something else. You want something more. Why are we so attracted to these sounds that a human can't actually make? It's because it's pushing us to the other side. It's pushing you to want something that's beyond human. All of this is Dionysian. Right about that, it's a great topic. What about the Apollonian? Well, the Apollonian is really, really, really important to musicians. And I started to mention it even while I was talking about the Dionysian. What if you had to wake up the next day? What do you have to do this every day? Consistency, showing up on time. All of this stuff is Apollonian. Apollo, the sun god. Show me the bright light. What do you do when you're making music? Do you have charts? Are those charts well organized? Should they be, I'm just going to make this slash mark and it means interpret it however you want. Yes, sometimes it's time to do that. But sometimes you want a very clear, crispy idea so that it can be easily learned by somebody, and that's the Apollonian. The Apollonian is about showing up on time. It's about practicing consistently, and it's about practicing with your whole mind attending to a specific concept. I'm trying to get my playing to be faster. I'm trying to hit this part more accurately, so I'm going to do it over and over again. And I'm going to do it 3 times each day all week, that part, because that's the part that's bothering me. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 3 times a day for 30 minutes. That's an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week. That's my practice schedule about this part, because I record on Saturday. All of this is Apollonian. It's logical, and it's about nailing a part. What is more important for an artist, the Apollonian or the Dionysian? Can you be an artist who is only Apollonian and has nothing of the Dionysian? Is that possible? Wouldn't that be somebody who does everything perfectly, but when you hear the music, you feel nothing? What about the Dionysian? Can you be just full secloso, just all feeling and, drug addictions and craziness and broken relationships, and how can you even be friends with this person because they never keep their word? And, how far can you go into the Dionysian before you've gone too far? What I will challenge you with is that if you're a musician, you need to have both of these. And if you're dancing with the devil on the Dionysian side, you have to find a way of making it Apollonian. And for me, when I had my band that I was working with really hard, if you go to that Animal Flower website, that's the library, you'd probably be able to see that somewhere on the syllabus, the library. There's a band called Irreality that I was in for a long time. I'm seeing these guys a lot these days. There's a whole album that we put together, and when we were writing, we wrote more interesting music than that was just the stuff that was easy enough for us to do in the time that we did it, because the technology had not come along so far. It was difficult to record. But what I would make them do is play the music in the dark. Like, we would turn off all the lights and we would turn on some spooky lights, and we would play in that state all the time to try to make the energy come. And then when we would play live, we were accurate, the Apollonian, but we were like throwing ourselves around and really performing Dionysian. So when people would come to our shows, they'd see us and they'd be like, "Oh man, you guys have something interesting going on. I will come again," because we were accurate, Apollonian, and we were emotional, Dionysian. Please write about this. Do a whole presentation about it. It's from Nietzsche's first book called, The Birth of Tragedy Through the Spirit of Music. And it was focused on how Wagner's music is going to save the world. And like I said, he moved away from Wagner as time went on, right? And that's why Wagner has a sad face there. Now, what is a contemporary Nietzschean outlook? This character, Jocko Willink, he's a Navy SEAL who teaches business people how to be better leaders. He was like a combat leader, an American Navy SEAL. He looks exactly like Thanos, and he has a video you could look up called Good. And he talks about how when he was leading these men, some of the leaders who were working under him would come in, they'd be commanding small units, and they'd come in and they'd have to report some problem to him. And they'd be like, "Sir, the enemy has broken through on this end and we need to reinforce, da, 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 da." And the thing that's so funny is that Jocko would always say, "Good." And then that was the first thing that he'd say back to the guy. The guy would come in and tell him some problem and be like, "The shipment that we were supposed to get has not arrived and we really need it." Good. And then he would go on to say it. And whatever he was saying, he was brainwashing himself to believe that this life that was happening in this moment is good. You did not get into the ensemble that you want to get into. Good. And then you go on with whatever your next thing is. And the thing that's so interesting about this is that whether or not you say, "Ah, man," or you say, "Good," you're now in the situation that you're in, and you have to respond to whatever it is that's happening. And no, not everything's good. And if somebody comes in and tells you something about themselves, like, "Man, this bad thing just happened to me," and you say, "Good," you might really damage your relationship with the other person. But if you're talking to yourself, This is actually a helpful practice to decide that life is good. Your life right now is good. So Nietzsche, this is his idea again, said that there were two kinds of people in the world. There were the life-affirming people who say yes to life, and there were life-denying people who say no to life. And guess who is the majority? Of course, it would be the life-denying people, haters who are going to hate. Nietzsche said that he himself was the lowest person on the life-affirming list. And he was sick often. He had a lot of tragedies in his life. He was always in love with women who did not love him back. Wagner's wife is probably on that list. Whatever. A lot is written about his life. But Nietzsche loved life. He loved this life that was very difficult for him to love, but he still loved it. And he said that the Übermensch, the overman, would be on the top of this line of life-affirming people. The free spirits are life-affirming. Things are not perfect, and the free spirit goes, yeah, whatever, it's cool. I'm cool with it, and I'm flowing with it. Yeah, it's not great, but hey, it is what it is. Let's keep this going, right? Life-denying, he said, and again, his dad was a big Christian, so he experienced Christianity as something that was kind of forced upon him. The way with you guys, kind of all of the religions of Thai society and culture feel like they're being pressed upon you. If you're younger than one of your older siblings and you're smarter than that older sibling, you have to pretend that you're dumber than that older sibling. Why? Confucianism is stupid or something. And then all these people think that that's Buddhism, but no, it's Confucianism, right? Oh man, I have to believe in ghosts and I have to believe in feng shui and everything because of Buddhism. No, neither one of those are Buddhism, right? But Buddhism in general, Falang pick up Buddhism and they're like, man, I mean, this is just like a martial art for the mind that you use against suffering, and then suffering gets lower. This is pretty cool. It doesn't even feel like a religion at all because I didn't have any lung forcing me to think that it is or isn't, right? No one is saying you have to believe in the 7 steps that the Buddha took when he was a baby or you're a bad person. Like, no one says that to the Falang. So Falang are like, yeah, Buddhism is cool, right? And you also don't need all of the other, the rain makes you sick, the wind makes you sick, all of the other stuff that seems to be tied to it. You don't have any of that. But Nietzsche got Christianity in that way, where it's like everything that was pressing down on him, you have to eat your broccoli. Why? Well, because Jesus says that, like he had all of this cultural nonsense pushing down on him. So Nietzsche's anti-Christian flavor is pretty famous. He said, because he was, like I said, quite anti-Christian, that the priests are at the top of the life-denying line of life. And he said that's because they say, yo, this life is nothing. It's just a test. You have to act right in this life so that you can get to the next life after you die, in which you're either going to heaven, which is very good, or you're going to hell, which is very bad. So this is a big test here. That's all it is. You follow what he would call slave morality, as you read it in the Bible and the 10 Commandments and all this other stuff. And if you follow that well enough, you get the prize after you die, right? And atheists, of course, will say you're being sold a false bill of goods. When you die, you're going to rot in the ground and nothing is going to happen. But this is something that we see in the shape of reincarnation. Live a good life right now, and in your next life, you're going to get something. Nietzsche would argue that these things are life-denying, and life-affirming is saying this right here is good. What do you think of this concept? Write about it. Do a presentation about it. There are 2 pieces of medicine that put you on the path for the greatest way of being a life-affirming person. One of them is called The Greatest Weight, The Eternal Return. We'll do that one, and we will also do Amor Fati, which is the part that comes along with it, and then we're done with Nietzsche. I'm going to read this because it's really good and it's really short. It's called The Greatest Weight. What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life as you live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and with you in it, speck of dust. Now would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine? If this thought gained possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps crush you. The question in each and everything, do you desire this once more and innumerable times more? Would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight? Or how well disposed would you have to become to your life and to yourself to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate, eternal confirmation and seal? That's the greatest weight. What in the world does that mean? He's basically saying that life would be this endless loop. It would start with you being born, it would end with you dying, and as soon as you die, it would reset. And that reset would continue to happen over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, eternally with nothing at all changing. So it's not reincarnation. You don't live a different life. It's not like the egg. Instead, you live the same life over and over and over and over again. On Friday night, when you get invited to that little hangout, not a party, but a hangout, and you don't go, instead, you lay on your back in your bed and you rot and you watch TikTok and Instagram Reels instead of seeing your friends. That same decision plays out over and over and over and over and over again throughout all of eternity. Or instead of rotting, you go to the party, you meet somebody who likes all the same music as you, and you start this really cool project together, and it changes your entire life. And that happens over and over and over, and you live that life instead over and over and over again. It's not quantum physics, where every time a particle splits in a certain way, reality breaks, and the one where you're a giant rock star versus the one where you own your own studio and become a producer or something, that split there, you get to keep both of them because you're both of them. So, no. One life, this life, on repeat, forever. And he has the question in there. Would you throw yourself on the ground and say, no, I don't want to do this life again because there's so many boring parts. I'm going to have to do my taxes again. I'm going to have to take that philosophy class again. I'm going to have to go through that shitty relationship that I don't get out of fast enough. I'm going to have to go through living with a person and we don't get along. I'm going to have to go through working a job that I hate. Or I'm going to have to shovel snow. I'm going to have to take out the garbage. I'm going to have to do the laundry and the dishes and all these things that we want to wish away. All of those things are going to happen. And he says, would this not lie on each of your actions like the greatest weight? Do you want to rot or go to the party? Now it matters because you have to live this life on repeat forever. And if you go to the party, you go to the party in all of these lives. And if you go to rot and watch Instagram, you watch Instagram in every version of it, right? You waste your life in every version of it. I'm not saying you don't need rest sometimes. Of course you do. What do you think of this? Now, there's a question as to whether Nietzsche is actually describing reality. Did he go and have some out-of-body experience and find out this is what reality really is? Or is this a thought experiment to ask yourself every time, when you have the chance between doing X or doing Y, and you do Y because you're like, what if this life is just on repeat forever? I got to not do the boring thing. I got to do the exciting thing. I got to take the shot. I got to take the risk. I got to take the chance, because maybe I'll make my life as a work of art that I can enjoy for all of eternity. Or maybe it's just nothing. Either way, if you follow the eternal return, you'd have a good time. But what about all the stuff that hurts? Well, he has a little bit of medicine for that. His second half of this is called Amor Fati, the love of fate. My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it. All idealism is mendaciousness in the face of what is necessary, but love it. Now, what is he saying? He's saying you should love your fate, not just your life and your decisions, but your fate, the things that happen to you. And a lot of times something will happen to somebody and I hear them say, gam, gam, gam. And it's almost a curse word. It's like, here, the web of Praditya Samutpat. I don't know how you guys say Praditya Samutpat. You guys say it differently in Pali. I say it in Sanskrit, but dependent origination, right? All of the webs of causality coming together have created this event. This event happens. I forgot this. Oh no, darn. I have to go and do this now. Gam, right? Fate. I have it on my wrist. On both sides. It's a thing that happens to you that you kind of can't control. Good luck. Bad luck. Where does it all come from? We ask, Ma du, what will happen? And we ask some other kind of Ma pi to change it for us somehow, and we try to tambun to aikai to get this web of fate to be changed in some way. And Nietzsche is not telling us to do any of that. He's telling us to love fate, because whatever it has brought you, that's your life. Love your life. All right. So that's enough for Nietzsche. Your homework is to think deeply about the eternal return and practice trying to love your life. And we now have final presentations coming up. I would invite you to come into the line group and give me some questions, try to find some group mates. I am watching that every day, hoping to answer some good questions for you in the line group. Some people have sent me individual line messages. My line account is just like a complete mess, and so I might miss some of those. You can also send me an email, but I really would prefer if you ask me the question in the line group, because then I answer the question for 222 people all at once. It's a big help for me. It's a big help for everybody else. I know everybody is like kind of shy to be posting in the line group, but just do it, man. Just like be like, hey, can we blah, 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 blah. I love seeing the questions in there. Thank you guys who are posting in there. It's nice to see it. And like I said before, if you have a show or something and you want to post about it, go ahead. We have all of these other line groups that are just a bunch of nonsense. I invite your nonsense. Yeah, this is about it. I think it was cool. I really appreciate it. I'm going to give you the final quiz as kind of a survey, and maybe you can tell me what you think in the final presentation. I hope that you're going to tell me what you think philosophically. I know that some of you are like, online class kind of sucks, would rather be in person, but maybe you can give me a little feedback on what you think the class was like. The last quiz will not be a real quiz. It will instead just be questions about how you think things went. And hopefully you're ready to rock for the final presentation. Again, I really want questions in there, so please do ask me whatever you can, because right now we're ending, and what I would be doing is saying, hey, we got final presentations coming up. I want you to ask me at least 5 questions. Go, and I'd be taking questions. I'd be handing you guys a microphone to try to get you to ask your questions so everybody else could hear it. This is really what I'm about right now, is your questions about final presentations. No ChatGPT scripts, no regular scripts, just no scripts, just talk, right? What if your English isn't perfect? Doesn't matter. I will not be grading your English. I've been teaching philosophy classes at Mahidol University for 10 years. And the first year, it was surprising to me. I was like, man, students' ability to speak English and their ability to do philosophy have nothing to do with each other. I'd be grading these very bad grammar, very good philosophy, A+. And I'd see another one that's like, very good English, but not good philosophy, and lower grade, right? So your English ability does not matter. I will understand you. If I don't understand you, I'm going to be like, what? I can say what? I can say, Alena Kap. Okay. Thank you guys for taking this journey with me. I have loved it. I love Nietzsche. I look forward to reading what you write this week, and I really look forward to final presentations. They are going to rock, and I will see you in Zoom. Peace.